Hello there, Sarah from 17 once again. This is my Give Me God of War walkthrough. We are post-boss fight, climbing with Atreus, and we're about to be rescuing a dragon. The good news of this quest is that you don't have to do too much of it to get it done, so if you're having problems, or if you're under-leveled, or if the enemies are just too much for you, you don't really have to interact with too many of them. You can just focus on getting rid of the murals, and then that's about it. There's even the opportunity to take on extra fights that you don't have to do. It's entirely up to you. I wouldn't hold it against you by skipping them, because I think it's one of the better choices. And just then, I did skip that fight, but I ended up taking a hit. And when I restarted the checkpoint, it put me back where I broke that particular monolith, or whatever you want to call it. And then it despawned the enemies when I respawned. Which is one of the problems with this game when it comes to making a walkthrough like this. Of course, checkpoints are always a good thing, unless you're looking for a very specific type of challenge. It all depends on what you want. But when it comes to editing things together, it can make it very, very difficult for the video to flow correctly, and it can lead to confusion. And it can be challenging. It can be one of the most challenging things of putting, sequences together to hope that the audience understands. And the one leap of faith that you assume as a producer of these things is that the person playing understands the game and understands where to go and understands what's happening in the video, so that you don't have to give them the breadcrumb trail to get there. And you can't always assume that, because the one thing I've learnt with my time on YouTube is that every time I've assumed something, it's generally been proven wrong. And not necessarily a fault on my part, just one of those things where people will surprise you, even when you think it's the most obvious, most specific, most easy thing to understand. There will be somebody out there who unfortunately doesn't quite catch on to it. And I'm that person in some situations, you're that person, it's one of those things that just happens. We can't all get the same things at the same time. That's why when some people watch The Matrix, they just, at the end of the movie, they say, I don't get it. And you kind of go, how do you not get it? Because to you it's obvious. But that is the releasing of Ota, the first of the freed dragons. I'm not going to be doing any of the other dragons because I don't know where the third one is, because I've never done it. And the second one has a fight that's one of the most disagreeable fights in the game, because it's incredibly high level unless you take it on right at the end of the game. And even then, you have to take on a Revenant with two of the heavy Viken enemies, and the entire time you're being attacked by a dragon. And the enemies, when I took them on in my first run, I believe they were... one of them was purple and the other two were orange, which means that they just have an incredible HP threshold, which leads to very miserable fights. And I didn't want to go back and do it, because a lot of the times these encounters don't even get you the things that I'm going for. So it's oftentimes a good idea just to fuck it off, basically. And this is another such fight. This is two level 5 Vikens that have purple HP, which generally means that the fights themselves are going to be a nuisance because they don't take damage. Nothing hurts them. You're hitting them for forever. And that's what happens when you play this game at a very low level. Not to say that I'm a low level, but if you are considerably lower than the enemy that you're fighting, any fight can become this, because it's just how the game is governed in its RPG nature. And for instance, there are videos on YouTube right now of level 1 runs that people are doing. They haven't showed you a lot of the game because it's boring as fuck to watch, but they've showed like Valkyrie fights and some boss fights and things of that nature. And every single enemy that they're coming up against, because they're at level 1, is 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 levels higher than them. And when they are that higher, it gives them those properties of the different coloured life bars, and it can also give them unblockable, unparryable properties too, and almost anything they hit you with will kill you as well. So they really mean business, and that's kind of the way the game gates progress and gates its content. It makes these enemies arbitrarily more difficult, but if you know how to dodge, and you have the patience and the skill to apply it, you can do it. But my argument against this is the same thing of like most of my arguments in most games that I play when it comes to difficulty, is that challenge is meant to be something you look to. You're looking for challenge, You're happy when you find it, but you're doing it because it stems from a fundamental place of enjoyment. You're not doing it because you're some masochist who enjoys like slapping himself in the face repeatedly. That's not why it's probably why some people do it. Once again, there's always, the exception. But that's not why I challenge myself. I challenge myself because I want to be tasked with something that feels impossible, but at the same time there's glimmers of hope. And pretty much everything in this game feels really possible, just super fucking boring. And that's the worst kind of motivation for difficulty, in my opinion. If you're wondering what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to lead these guys so that they come into a more funneled area. Because whenever you have these enemies that like to throw projectiles at you, never underestimate their perfect aim. It's one of those really annoying parts of video games where when you elevate the difficulty, they just turn the aimbot higher and it becomes insane. And these type of enemies have such a good throw and have such good capabilities of hitting you in places you didn't expect. You'll get Worms flashbacks if you ever played those games. Because these dudes, they might not be bending rocket launcher blasts by using the wind and then arcing it down perfectly into the geometry exactly where you are, but they're pretty bloody close. And because they're purple as well, they do take quite a pounding, but I believe because they're projectile enemies, if you run up to them, you can do incredible damage with the Executioner's Cleave. And I'm not entirely sure why that is, but I've noticed with this enemy type that when they level up to being elites, you still do really good damage with Executioner Cleave, and I love that. That to me is fantastic design, and I don't know if it was added, I don't know if it was there from the beginning, but it's a very good idea. Because that's perfect in my eyes. Make them more lethal, but make them more fragile. That's exact. Look at that. See what I mean? Instantly kills him pretty much. That is a rarity on this difficulty too. He's level 5, he's purple life, and it instantly killed him practically. I love that. That is so perfect. And in these videos, you've heard me be very critical of this difficulty. But that right there gives me faith. That gives me hope that there are people who are in charge who know what they're doing. And that's good. Because whatever they do next with the series, and whoever directs it, is going to be taking what they've done in this game, and they're going to be forging forward and making a vastly new path, but taking along all the qualities and hopefully adding to them, right? So I'm hoping that they add in the places where this game felt weak to me, which is in areas of balance, in areas of enjoyment in fights. Because, do you really think you should throw a fucking axe 4 times at a nightmare to kill it? Come on now, it's meant to be a cheesy bullshit enemy, but it's meant to die super quick. Like, you know my favourite aspect of that particular criticism as well? Is that there are tooltips telling you that, oh, you just grab the nightmares and throw them at their buddies. It's like, how? How the fuck do I do that? And then later on when you've played the game, you understand how that happens, but you're not able to do that until you're halfway through the game. So why is the tooltip like, just grab them, they're dead easy? Like, that's the most evil tooltip, and there's a couple tooltips on the loading screens, which I disagree with so fervently, it makes me sad. Like, really, really crazy ones that baffle my mind, like, upgrading Kratos' equipment will enable him to stagger enemies better. What? Really? You wanted to do that? Come on, now. That's just stupid to me. Why would upgrading my weapon make it stagger somebody more? It makes no sense. It's the same fucking weapon, it's just now gilded with shiny jewels in it. Come on, now. All that does is make you feel like a bitch when you use an unupgraded one. It's so strange. What a weird thing. Like, it's so bizarre to me. It really is. As I experiment, look around and notice a couple more of the Vikings who are creeping up on us here. This is a bit of a different pace to a lot of the other videos where I'm just kind of exploring this area and killing some folk. And I love it when you throw the axe and they freeze. I think that's probably my favourite new mechanic. And I do find it interesting because there's a lot of information online right now, a lot of forums, a lot of opinions, a lot of, you know, very vocal people who are talking about how this axe is the greatest fucking video game weapon ever conceived. And I don't even know why I cursed then, but I did. I should probably stop that because it's probably going to get me demonetized, but sometimes it needs to be said, you know. Does anybody here right now think that this weapon is innovative, interesting, and new? Because if you do, I feel sorry for you. I really do. Did you never see Thor? Did you never read that shit? Did you never understood that that's what that hammer does? I can't imagine being this amazed by something that's existed for a long time. Like, what happened to all the people who lived here? I don't understand. I think the axe is okay, and I think throwing it and retrieving it's pretty satisfying, and I think they designed it about as well as you can design it. But it's not exactly knocking my socks off. And admittedly, I am probably more critical and harder to please than a lot of other people. But still, I just don't get it. People are calling it like the weapon of the century. And admittedly, this is not the majority here. This is definitely a minority opinion. Because the majority opinion that I see about God of War is that it's boring. Which I think is crazy, but I understand it. Because a lot of people, when they play this game, they just spam the Leviathan throw. And when you see somebody just constantly throwing the axe, like I might be about to do in this fight right now, it can look really boring. And I get that completely. You don't notice when you're playing, because you're too busy noticing the little bits of damage you're doing and the safety of it and the utility of it. But to watch it, it's probably complete garbage, right? And there are some games that are just really fun to play and horrible to watch. I don't think this is one of them, but you know, a lot of people that I'm seeing online are definitely putting forward this opinion that the combat's really uninteresting, the axe is really uninteresting, and I kind of get it. I think aside from the freezing and the throwing it and a lot of the runic moves, I don't really find the axe's moveset to be that interesting. I find the idea of tripping people up really funny and really fun and really cool, and I like the strategic applications of it. But as a weapon, I personally thought he was going to get 2, because to me, that's kind of what Kratos does, right? He takes these conventional weapons, these blades, and then he turns them into something stupid. And I don't even know if it was him that turned them into what they were, because it's been such a long time since I've watched the story on the original games. But he attached blades to chains and essentially had whip blades, which is preposterous and stupid and ridiculous and amazing, right? I think the Blades of Chaos are so much more interesting than this axe on every foundational level. And it might be bias, it might be just the fact that I really, really love God of War. I really do. And this game is so different, so much so that it feels drastically different, right? And it's meant to, that's the point. But I don't see this adoration that I read when I do read those rare threads for this axe, and people saying that it's like the best, most awesome weapon designed in the last 10-15 years. Because whenever people say shit like that, I always go to stupid Turok weapons, because to me they were really creative and fun and ahead of their time, and I hate that Halo changed all of that. But I find it very strange, the dichotomy of the opinions at the moment. It's either boring, nothing but throwing the axe, or the axe is the best weapon in gaming ever. And no one, like, there's no middle to this. There's always the two extremes, which is kind of fascinating, but I don't share it, you know. I noticed that quite early on in the game, that I didn't think any of the axe combos were that interesting. Like, I think my favourite ones, obviously I like the Executioner's Cleave, but it's for the utility. The move itself I think is boring. I love the fact it gives the execution at the end, if they're weak enough to it. I think that's a beautiful piece of design, but it's something that the game should have had more of anyway, so once again, calling that a pro is quite difficult as well. By the way, guys, there's a lot of wolves here, so throwing your axe is a really good strategy against wolves, and also make sure you're pressing square to keep Atreus stunning them, and then if you have any abilities to, to do the runic attack with the boy, to bring in the wolves or the crows or whichever one you're using, you want to do that as well, because it's wonderful for distraction. Traditionally, I would use the rams, you know, the dudes that can help you stunlock enemies, but on this particular walkthrough, I'm going to be using the crows, because they were very, very kind to me, and I came up with some interesting strategies with them that will hopefully help you out. But we're moving back through the foothills now, and we've got a shortcut thanks to the path that led us down when we came back down here with Freya, so we don't have to do the climbing, which is always nice, and I'm going to trim it out, I'm going to move forward. But I really like the hold R1 with the axe where he throws it, and I really like the stance swapping axe moves where you press 1R1, wait for him to settle, and then at the end of it you press it again, and you can kind of do these really nice button presses, button timed combinations. But the problem with them is you have to have, is it level 6 axe? So you can't get them immediately, so they're not moves that you can immediately spec into and have fun with. And one of the things I noticed in this game when I was playing it is that the more fancy moves I had on Kratos, the more I tended to not get what I wanted. And I think this is important. When you have a base moveset, you get very used to your ranges, your animations, and what's happening when you're doing certain things. And when you spice this up with the variety and the diverse moveset, you can end up getting caught in animations you're unfamiliar with, and you can't cancel them the same, and it can lead to you taking hits you shouldn't take. So there is actually a luxury that comes with a Spartan playstyle, even though it's not as fancy to watch. But thank you for watching, and you take care now.